Amen.
Atul, Tandon spoke last night, and they thought it would be good if you could hear more, not of his head, but his heart. And so they asked if I would spend a little time with him this morning and let you get to know part of what makes him tick. Brother Atul, why don't you come up and join us? Atul and I have known each other for a long time. We served together in different roles at World Vision, and there was a sense on our board that you needed a crazy, throttling forward stallion that was knocking down all the walls, and you only needed one of them because they caused so much trouble. And
where's my chair?
He was a troublemaker for the poor. Brother, it's a thrill to sit together with you again.
Thank you.
And to see that your heart has not changed.
Thank you.
Why do you remain a person of hope?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, I heard the preacher here just before you got up. He said, Mark Thompson's going to give us $5 million. So, why should I not be a person of hope?
I'm sorry. I went in the break. I went up to Mark Thompson and I said, Mark, $5 million, who knew? I'll name the downstairs ladies' toilet for you. Let's do it.
But thank you. I am a person of hope. John, thanks for asking, and you're right. We've known each other a long time. Thank you for letting my board chair know that all that he expects is trouble for me. He already knows that. You just confirmed.
Is that a big surprise at all?
No, ask him. Yeah. I spoke briefly, I think it was in the morning at a time, about my own upbringing. I'll talk about why I'm a person of hope. So I was born in a two-room tenement in Delhi. And for all of her life, my grandmother, you saw the photographs yesterday of people who are, and there was a photograph of how people cook. The first one was about the charcoal fire on the floor. That was my grandma. My mom, remember the picture. There's a photograph of a kitchen with a propane stove. That was my mom. We didn't have the $32 photograph, which is today. Now, in today's kitchen, my wife actually doesn't cook. I cook. So that's the progress of humanity. That's why I'm a person of hope.
Biraj, his wife, should be here.
Yes. And she'd say, yeah, he's a good cook, except that I don't eat his cooking. Yeah. So be on guard. But that's why I'm a person of hope, is to have seen that transition, is to have seen, my grandfather walking, my father on a bicycle. And today, I think I spend more time at 35,000 feet up in the sky in an aluminum tube, right? Highly pressured, up in a plane. He actually never saw the inside of a plane. I saw the inside of a plane the first time I was 23 years old. I'll wait for the day when I see the inside the last day, but we'll wait for that. It's time to come. So, and I see that just not in our family, but I see that in millions of families. And that's why I'm a person of hope. I don't think we realize quite sitting here the terrific extent, the length, the breadth, and the depth of the times of not only economic prosperity, but the freedom that we all have to pursue a path of our choosing. It's never been before in human history that so many people have had that opportunity and that freedom. And that gives me hope, because I do believe that we are far closer to where everybody will be able to be there than we were when even I was born.
When we met, as I said, we were working together for another international NGO, and Atul was called elsewhere, and then Warren Staley, whom you saw last night with his very impressive wife, talked to me one day and said, we're looking for a new president. Do you know anybody? He said, there's this fella, Atul Tandon. And I said, if you can get him, do whatever it takes. And I said that in part because I knew Atul, but I said that also because the person who climbs a mountain has seen something. The person who climbs their second mountain has a whole different view of the whole range of mountains. And that's what part of what Atul brings is the scope of poverty around the world. So we'd like to talk a little bit about opportunity, microfinance, and how it's evolved around the world. He gave you a little chart yesterday of how that had changed in model. But I wondered if, as you talked about the huge decrease in gut-wrenching poverty, what we have found is that the folks who are left down at the bottom of the bottom of the bottom are much harder to lift up than the last generation was.
Yeah.
What are you going to do with the last hardest 750 million?
So let me set the stage for that. We are all part of the microfinance sector, all of us. Over the last about 25 years, and there are people in the room who've actually walked those years, who are much better positioned to talk about it than I am. Over those last 25 years, microfinance started about 3 to 5 million people in 1997, in the early 90s, clients. Today, about 250 million. When you talk about, and these are largely working poor, people who are already economically active. All right, change the question. Of the total 250 million, how many are extremely poor? People who are on the very bottom of the economic pyramid. Largely, it's about a third. 2/3 of the 250, 1/3 is extremely poor. The challenge that our sector faces, John, is that in the last, since about the economic crisis, the end of it, 2009, that percentage of 33% being extremely poor is actually reducing. Why? Principally because, money's cheap, lots of money flooding into the market, and what all of us call social impact capital coming into the industry where you can now see economic returns. Well, what does an investor demand? Economic return. What is the natural response of people like me? Find the clients whom you can serve and deliver an economic return. The impact, more people, the industry moving up market, going from $4 a day to $6 a day to $8 a day to $10 a day. The people who are now at the bottom of the pyramid, less than $2 a day, are increasingly facing fewer and fewer choices. So that dilemma, and when we start to look at actually the more detailed question, how many microfinance networks today are serving actively the extremely poor, those numbers largely are of localized or regional players. They aren't of worldwide players like Opportunity. So when you put those two things together, the juxtaposition, we have now the toughest part left, about 737 million. We have proven models that we can now track back 25 years and we can say, well, we can see livelihoods improving. We can see more schools being funded, children going to school, and we can go on that. We have that, but we are actually turning our backs. So the first response I would have is that we, as people of hope, of people of faith, our call, when you started this, bruised camels, I like that, by the way, is to go where nobody else goes, is to go where I believe the people whom God loves most, people of goodwill. In our mindset, they're the people who deserve the best from us. People of God's will, people of goodwill. And that's where I believe Opportunity needs to go. Second question, will our model work? My answer would be yes and no. In that...
Let me interrupt you for 1 second, because I want to hear that. When we gather in rooms like this, and you look at the plight of the poor around the world, you are in some ways getting a master's degree in what international development look like. It's easy to give that dollar when somebody comes up to you. Our friend at World Vision, Rich Stern, says if you want to really affect change, it is rocket science. Yeah. It is complex. When I was on the board in the 80s, Larry Reed was one of the leaders, and he led us through an exercise of how we were just exploding our loans in growth in Latin America, and showed how we were losing money on every single loan we gave. He said, we cannot afford this kind of success. So it's an evolving thing, and so when you say, is it working, I want to hear where it's working and where your challenges are.
So where absolutely it works today is on where we have the working poor, right? If you are a working poor person, we know how to serve you. The mix of, if you will, financial resources that you need, the training that you need, and the support that you need, right? And those models have been developed pretty well over a long period of time. And those models, over the last 10 to 15 years, as technology has improved, as our distribution systems have improved, where opportunity is an example, we work through partners. We don't actually have physical branches across the world. We can't afford to the point that Larry made. The best use of our capital is to invest the money and then invite local capital into it and local debt, multiply it, and then give out the loans. What we do need to know, of course, in the middle of that is the expertise of knowing who the poor are and what they actually need. So you develop the product set that they need, and to make sure that that right product set gets to them. And then a rigorous, if you will, monitoring system to say, all right, are we on track, right? When you do those things, the right partners, good governance, the right kind of capital coming in, the like-minded capital, the right expertise, and a not passionate, but a committed, dedicated embrace of monitoring. We are going to make sure that what we're doing is actually working and learn from it. Then you start to see differences. The problem when it comes to the extremely poor is the Larry Reed problem. I'm going to call it the Larry Reed problem from now on.
Let's blame it on Larry.
He started it. Sure. Yeah. So the problem is this. And I'm not an economist, but I'll try and describe the problem. The economic return that an extremely poor person will get on every hour of labor that they invest, right? Every hour of labor that they invest, the economic return. The capital needed to give them that economic return, the investor demands a higher rate of return.
Which is what
right?
you were talking about.
So if let's say it takes you, I'll pick a number. It takes you $10 of capital to actually get this extremely poor person trained for a job, skilled, whatever it is. The economic return on that $10 of capital, modern economics, even if it is debt, will be somewhere between 6 to 7% all told. It could be 4%. When you do the math, now for that $10, the economic return that the investor is demanding is now going to be higher than the economic return that the extremely poor person is going to get for that as wages. They can't pay it. Now, by the way, that was true when we started microfinance in the early 80s. Right. That's why we were having losses. As these people got trained, they started earning more per hour. Then you ended up getting more incomes per hour. You ended up being able to pay the investor back. Why am I hopeful? That's why I'm hopeful. We are back in some ways to the future. We're going to go back. We will have to go through a fairly extended period. And that's where our stomach comes in. We will have to go through a fairly extended period where we will have to, I won't use the word subsidize, I'll use the word invest
Better view. Better view.
Right. We will have to invest in these people that as they start to earn a living and as their skills improve, whether it's and most of our 98% of our clients are women, is as their skills improve, as they get better at reading, as they get better at mathematics, as they pick up more skills. If you were here yesterday, you heard Linda the baker. She started with one oven,
That's so
right?
great.
And before she started with that one oven, she went to a vocational school. Her mom mortgaged the future of the family, sent it to school. Well, now she can do 15, and now she can do 25. So that journey is what we will have to take a walk with our clients on. And to do that is where our challenge comes.
Again, I could go at this for a while. I think if you have the chance, at some point you ought to say, the world is changing around us. What challenges do you see for the MED sector in this political and social and economic world? What would be a challenge that you would say, we're only going to thrive if we hit this inside this new culture?
Well, I think the first, for the sector itself, I would say our biggest challenge, and I can speak for my part of the industry, the nonprofit, is really are we going to embrace our first love? Are we going to embrace the extremely poor? That's where we started. When the Women's Opportunity Network, the people who made us become aware of the fact of trust groups and women and giving loans to them, the opportunity did. By the way, it wasn't you with you didn't have a bald head, but it was your sisters who made them. You realized that many, many years back. When they started, that's where we were. Now we are back. So that's one of the biggest challenges, is that we realize who our first love is and are willing to now, as part of our portfolio, focus on that. For us, an opportunity, increasingly, the extremely poor will be a larger part of our portfolio. Where we are today, with about 10 million clients, it'll be a period of time by the time we'd say all 100% are in that category. So that's the first. For opportunity itself, I believe the challenges are going to be, John, around we are one more time, and I underline that, one more time, we are at the cusp of change. Now, we've been here before. We started giving loans to individuals. Carlos Moreno, our first client, was one. He wasn't in a trust group. We went from there to trust group lending, discovered that, invented that. We went from there to realizing savings banks were needed. Well, how do you get the bank? Get them to banks, to bankers to open savings. There are no bankers. Let's set up the banks, right? If there is, as in Asia, if there's an economic system that's well developed, instead of setting up your own entities, partner with existing entities, but then figure out how to work with them effectively, right? Ken Vanderweel is here. Well, the US government, the Berlin Wall comes down, the Iron Curtain falls. What are we going to do? And that's so what we're going to do is to send Ken and Linda with, I think, 3 or 4 children, how many? Off to Bulgaria, right? You go to Sofia. I was just there a few months back. Even now, there's graffiti on the walls, and half of the buildings are broken. And I'm saying, Ken and Linda, in this place, in the 80s? I can't imagine. That guts, that courage is what I believe we have to reclaim, to go out. And I think we are. And I look, and there are people in this room, and I do want to make sure that you chat with them. I will be up on the stage. We are, we frankly walked into education finance. 10 years back, our clients come to us, kids are not going to school. What are you going to do about it? Help me. Let's give you a small loan, start a school, right? And here we are, 10 years later, experimentation, piloting, many, many mistakes. I can't tell you it's all been rosy. It's not. But here we are, 6,000 schools, almost 2.3 million children. An extraordinarily innovative model that today our team, Andrew is here, the head of the team, can tell you that model is capable of such massive scale. I wasn't kidding when I said yesterday, he believes you could grow 4 times the number of children.
How thrilling
In
is
5.
that?
It's just, and it doesn't stop there, and that's why I think is why I'm so hopeful for opportunity. All right, the next challenge, I'll stay with education. We could go into agriculture, we could go into digital. It's the same story, but I'll stay with education. Well, the moms come back to us. Well, you got the kids in the school, John, but they're not getting good education. What are you going to do? So what does Opportunity do? This is in the last 5 years. It's not even in the last 10. And Nathan Baird, who's moved on, he gathers around a team of his people, of our staff, and then goes out and, frankly, in rooms like this, recruits volunteers. And I met a few of those volunteers and says, will you help us? Go and sit in these schools and find out how to improve the learning environment. Because we don't have any literature, we have any data. You know what comes back? 4 years later, a program, Education Quality Improvement, that has got 30 different disciplines of practice documented. Everything from building codes, to classroom sizes, to teacher profiles, to improvements in curriculum, all created by sitting, observing, listening, and people like yourselves, some of our staff. And that is the program that now 1,000 of those schools are going through. We can tell you, our research, the kids going into those schools, 66% more likely than in our own other funded schools to finish high school. Girls in the 1,000 improvement program schools, twice more likely to have girls stay through. So you can start to see dramatic improvements. And then I walk into the USAID office a week back with Dennis Ripley, our Chief Program Officer. What do we get told? Well, here is the head of education for all of USAID. And when we give her the number, her mouth falls open, John. She says, you were kidding me. I said, no, I'm not kidding you. But she says, you know who your biggest peer is? How many schools they have? Bridge Foundation with 500. So that's what gives me, we have been here before. We have taken on big challenges, knowingly or unknowingly. And we have got them to a point where the system works, the system scales. And at that point of departure, and this is the thing I love most about Opportunity, is Opportunity has always believed that what we know, the world should know. Opportunity doesn't embrace and hold tight. Opportunity opens arms and gives away. We gave away, if you will, microinsurance, developed it, sold it to AXA. Our education improvement programs, whoever wants is available. We actually work with partners to teach them to how to give the loans, how to improve the schools, and pass it on. We don't hold it. Agricultural finance, the same story. Microfinance, the same story. And I think that distinctive of Opportunity when it comes to extremely poor is what I personally wish and pray. We will commit ourselves to finding the secret sauce. And I do believe it's in our grasp. It'll take some minor amount of changes. And the people in this room, our volunteers, our supporters, our staff, most of all our clients, our partners are going to work out that together. And then my prayer is as we discover it, we will be there with open hands and open arms. Come and learn. Come and take. Come and eat. And in that process, I do believe not only are the poor helped, but God glorified.
The symbol of my denomination, the Presbyterians, is an open Bible with a fire coming out of it. And it is to symbolize the Spirit working throughout. And for me, looking to this man, I see a heart on fire and a head that wants to look forward. Thank you, Atul.
Thank you. Thank you so
Blessings
much.
on you, brother.
Thank you.